Hi, my name is Tony. The tape that you're about to view is set up for the amateur. We're going to go through the basics of how to start the tattoo in a tattoo business. What you're going to want to do is check with your local towns before you even attempt to start tattooing on a business level. We're going to run through all the machines that you're going to need, what type of equipment you're going to need. You're obviously going to need to start out with some artwork. You can use clip art. You can buy tattoo flash, as they call it. There's catalogs available. There's a lot of suppliers that you can get this type of stuff from. You're going to want to start out with some real basic tattoos when you first start out in the business. The more advanced tattoos are going to come later. We have other videos that are available that are going to go into advanced shading and coloring and start to do some of these larger pieces of work. There's a lot of money to be made in this business. It takes a little bit of practice, and this video is going to help you go through pretty much everything from how to set your machine up, what colors to use, and how to put an actual tattoo onto somebody. You're going to see the whole thing right on this tape. Now I'm going to show you some basic tubes that you'll need. There's outlining tubes, there's coloring tubes, and then there's shading tubes. This is a basic outlining tube. You'll notice that the hole is smaller. Outlining tubes will take a smaller needle. This particular tube is set to hold a 3-needle outliner. This is a basic shading grip. The hole here can hold up to 7 needles. It can also be used as an outliner for thicker outlines when you're going to use a 5-needle outliner, which we'll show you in a minute. This is a basic flat shader. Notice the size of the hole. This can hold up to 22 needles, and they will be a flat configuration, which we'll show you also. These are two different types of grips that come on the tubes. You can see this one is much fatter than this one. There's two reasons for those. One reason for the heavier grip, some people prefer that in their hand. It just feels more comfortable. Also, if you're putting in a lot of black ink, it works as a counterweight on the tattoo machine. It'll give you a little bit more weight to put the tattoo ink in a little bit deeper. Mostly it's for comfort. All of the tubes that we've shown you have been sealed in sterilized packages, and this is what they'll look like when you start to use them. This is a set of sterilized tattoo needles. This is the way they'll look before you use them. We're going to start out showing you two basic needles that you're going to use. This is an outliner and this one is a shader. The difference is the outliner is pushed into a point. The shader, the needles are a little more separated and more in a brush-like configuration. These are some of your basic supplies you're going to need to start your tattooing. In the foreground you can see we have some ink caps. We have two different size ink bottles. We have a bottle of green soap and a bottle of alcohol. The ink caps come in several different sizes. This is a basic size that you're going to use for a tattoo. Inks also come in two different sizes. You can purchase them either way. This is a 2-ounce bottle and that's an 8-ounce bottle. It's just a matter of how many colors you're going to use. Some colors you're going to go through faster than other colors, so you'll probably wind up purchasing them, such as blacks and reds, in larger quantities. The green soap, that's surgical tincture of green soap. That's used to wash down the tattoo area before you start, and during the process of the tattoo you're going to be spraying the green soap to keep the area clean. The alcohol will do two things. Before you apply your stencil, you clean the skin with the alcohol, and also when you change colors, you're going to use the alcohol to spray through your machine into the tube to clear the ink out. These are two basic power supplies that you're going to need to run your tattoo machine. The one at the top has basically your on and off switch, and this dial here will regulate the amount of power that you're going to send to your tattoo machine. The one in the bottom is a little more elaborate. It has a volt and an amp meter, which will give you more of a visual on how fast your machine is going to run. You can still set it here, but then you can see how much volt and how much amps you're putting out. That's something we'll get into later. The switch holes on the front, there's obviously one for a foot switch and one for your clip cord, which we're going to show you in a minute, that shows how to hook this up to the machine. These are some of the other accessories you're going to need that go along with your power supply unit. This is a set of clip cords and a foot switch. There's two different types of clip cords you can use. These have a terminal that hooked to the back of the machine. This is a typical RCA jack that plugs into the machine. And this one I've drawn here shows the tube and the needle would already be in and set in the machine. These are electromagnets, and then there's an armature bar, and then there's a front spring and a back spring that regulates the tattoo machine. Once you have this thing hooked up, your clip cords will clip into the machine. You'll see on most machines there's two little holes that, and this is a little spring on here. You'll just squeeze it together and it'll pop into there and it'll hold it into the machine. That's going to get plugged right into where it says clip cord on your box, and then you're going to have a foot switch that's going to plug in where it says foot switch. This is your foot switch, and what happens is you'll step on the foot switch and that will send electricity up here to the two coils, which will then magnetize them. That'll pull the armature bar down, and what happens there, the needle will then come out of the end of the tube. Once this thing, the armature bar comes down and touches the two coils, it breaks the connection. There's a little set of points up here. When that connection is broken, that shuts off the magnets and basically just shuts it off. So what it is every time you step on that pedal, you complete the circuit, and it's going on, off, and it's just turning this on. And the faster it goes, how you set your box here, we'll talk about that in a minute, it will determine how fast this thing is going to come in and out of the skin. Once you set up your machine, you've got the needle set into the tube, and I'm going to talk about this again. The needle barely comes out the edge of the tube. That's how you set the depth. So when you're tattooing somebody, the deepest you'll ever be able to go, once that needle comes all the way out, is to the edge of that tube. And that'll determine the depth. You don't want to set that thing with the needle protruding out the end any more than just a fraction of an inch, just sticking out the edge of the tube. So it's a pretty basic operation to set it up. The adjustments that you can make on the machines where the points connect, there is a little set screw right here, and that will determine the gap in between there. It's just like a set of car points basically. When you're outlining, you can set this gap with a simple thing like a dime. You can take a dime and put it in between there and just turn the screw to the gap as to the width of a dime. For shading, you want your machine to run a little bit slower, so you're going to open this up and set it to the size of a nickel. And that's a pretty basic gap on a tattoo machine, so it'll run at the proper speed. You're going to have two rubber bands going across. You'll see that on every tattoo machine. Once the machine starts going, the needle's going up and down, but you don't want it to sway back and forth, and the rubber bands actually keep that needle from moving too fast in the tube back and forth. It keeps it real steady. So as you draw, the tattoo line is not all jagged. It's a real smooth line, and the rubber bands make that. You'll change those rubber bands about every third tattoo. You can change them. They get stretched out. The clip cord that I showed on here, like I said before, this is a spring type that connects between the two posts on the machine. There's also an RCA jack that basically looks like the other end. Some tattoo machines have a little plug here that you can plug it in, and you can eliminate the idea of the old clip cord thing. The power units, they're going to vary depending on which type you have. Some have 2 meters on them, some don't have any meters on them, and the meters are just more regulation to run the machine. Basically, you're going to have a knob, and you're going to, as you turn it, you're going to turn up the voltage, and you're going to hear the machine run faster and slower. And when I show you the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tattoo some grapefruits to give you an idea how the machine works and what it looks like, and that's a good thing to practice on before you start doing people. So we're going to do that next. What we're going to show you here is a real easy way to practice, and we're actually going to practice on a grapefruit. You notice I'm wearing rubber gloves here. Always work with your machine, whether you're practicing or not, use the rubber gloves, because it's hard to get used to handling everything with rubber gloves on. If you do it without them, just for your practicing, when you really start to tattoo, you're going to put these gloves on and everything's going to feel different to you. So get used to working all the time with rubber gloves. You should always have them on. I'm going to show you again how to set the machine up. I'm going to set this up with an outlining needle. We're going to open up a package of needles here. I'm going to get that set. What I'm going to use on this for the practice, this is a number 5. That means there's 5 needles in here that are pushed to a round point, and it's an outliner. It's a little different than the shader. I told you before, the shader is more like a brush type configuration in the needle. So we're going to set this one up in here. What you want to do is take the needle. You see how the hoop is on the bar? There's a little break in the hoop here. It's coiled that way. What you want to do is set that into the machine. Go through the bottom of the machine, set it up. There's a little rubber grommet on the end of that armature bar. You're going to push the needle bar over that grommet so it's on there good and tight. Okay? If you have a problem getting this onto the grommet, I'll show you another way you can do it first. You can take the grommet right off the end of there. You can see there's just a little steel post. You can actually insert the grommet into the needle bar. Sometimes this is easier because they're hard to get on when they're on the machine. And then just run it the other way through the machine. Just pull it through. And then just stick the whole thing right on the end of the armature bar. You always remember that when you put this needle on, the hoop is going that way. So that's the way your needle is set. You'll see how the needle is soldered onto the bar. The needle's got to be on the bottom. The bar should be on top, the needle's soldered to the bottom. Now your needle's in the machine. You loosen up the chuck a little bit, that's going to hold the tube. We're going to get a tube out here. I'm going to use the tube here with a bigger grip on it, just because it's easier to look at. Slide that up inside of there. And then you're kind of basically threading the needle through the little end of the tube there. That's all you want to do is get it so it falls right inside the thing. And be careful with this too, you don't want to bend the needle when you're doing it, so go real slow. And then just draw that up and tighten this down. And I'm going to show you the end of this tube so you know how far it went in. We're going to tighten this chuck up here so the tube doesn't slide around. Now you'll be able to see the needle's in, the tube is set onto the bar. The needle is going to just, what you're going to do is loosen this again and just slide that tube up until that needle just protrudes through the bottom of the tube. And it's about maybe the thickness of a couple sheets of paper is all that needle is going to stick out of that tube. And I'm gonna push on the armature bar up here and force the needle to come out so you can see about how far it's coming out. You can barely see it. You can, if you touch the end of this tube and wrap your finger across it, that needle would be barely coming out. And then when you push down on the bar, that's about how far you're coming out. I'll put this up against the glove, maybe you can see. So that's what the needle looks like. Barely sticking out of the tube, and when it's fully projected, it's coming out just about that far. You're just a few millimeters, it's coming out. You're only going down 3 layers of skin. You're not trying to dig down in there. Once you've got that set up, you take the 2 rubber bands and you just slide them down around the needle bar. If you remember before on that chart I was telling you, the needle's going up and down, the armature bar. Here's the set of contact points. So when I step on my foot pedal, that's going to send power through the machine. You're going to keep your foot on that pedal constantly, the machine will be running, and all the machine's doing is on, off, on, off, on, off. The foot switch has nothing to do with the on and off of the machine while it's running. You'll step on it, the machine will go. If you want to stop the machine, you take your foot off the pedal. Now that you've got the machine set up, I'm going to plug it in. I showed you on the other chart that you could use a set of clip cords that go between these 2 posts. I'm going to use an RCA jack on mine. It's got a little jack, so all I have to do is plug it in. I'm going to run the machine now, and you're going to be able to see it actually working right in here. You'll see I'm going to step on the pedal. My foot is on the pedal, the machine is running, and all it's doing is turning these magnets on and off and causing that armature bar to make a contact and then release, contact and release. And you can hear the machine running. It's not running too fast. I'm going to go over to my box here. I'm going to let the machine run, and I'm going to show you the difference in the sound. You can hear the machine run. That's a normal sound that your machine should run at. If it sounds like that, you're running the machine way too fast. If you run it like this, where it starts to sputter and hesitate, you're running the machine way too low. So all you have to do is just take your dial once you've got the machine set up and just keep turning the dial till you get it to sound at a nice, even, should just sound like that, a nice tone. And then you're pretty much ready to start the tattoo. We've got the machine set up now, and I poured a little bit of black ink in the ink cup. And what I'm going to do is we're going to practice on a grapefruit. This is a good thing to practice on because it's small. It's kind of hard to get straight lines to go across this, and that's a good practice because when you start on skin, it's not going to be a flat surface anyway. You're going to be on arms and legs and things, and they're going to be kind of rounded anyway. It'll give you a good feel for the machine. When you hold your tattoo machine, you never want to hold it straight up and down like this and push down into it. The machine gets held at a 45-degree angle, and you're going to just draw across like this. And we're going to start at the bottom and work up on all the lines. Later on in the video, you'll see when we're actually tattooing somebody, I talk about where to start on the tattoo, how you work from the bottom up, and it's pretty well explained in there. But for right now, all you want to do is just get a feel of what this thing's actually going to do. So we're going to start the machine, we dip it in the ink, and just take it and just run a little line. You're going to get a lot of ink that's going to splash around the edges and stuff like that. Have a paper towel ready, and you can wipe it off, and that's basically what you got. You want to get it so you have a pretty nice straight line. You can take a pen, you can draw some simple little figures onto here if you want, little flowers, curved lines, anything you need to practice with. Another good thing to practice with also, you can actually take a pencil and take your tube and your needle out, put the pencil up in here. You may have to wrap some tape around the edge of the pencil because it might not be as thick as this tube. Lock the pencil down, get some paper, and just sit and draw on paper to get the feel of the weight of this machine on your hand all the time. That'll give you a pretty good feeling of how it is. So, like I said, you're just going to practice on this whole grapefruit. You know, practice straight lines, and then you want to practice some like simple stuff like circles. You could do some curved lines on here, and just wipe it off so you can kind of see what you're doing. If you're trying to draw a straight line and you're winding up, and I'm going to draw a rotten line here, and you wipe your thing off and you're getting something like that, that means you're not pulling your hand across steady, you're not pulling it across slow. You want to do it in a real easy, sweet motion. You don't want to go too slow either. When you're actually tattooing somebody, you're not going to want to go and sit there and go that slow, because that needle's going in and out of them. Once you start, you want to keep that machine moving. Take your foot off the pedal, it'll stop, and you look. That's the kind of lines you want to have. You want to have straight lines. You don't want anything jagged. You don't want them to look where when you're making the line, you're going to have a nice smooth line, then you're going to have a big ball of ink there. That'll happen if you're going too slow. What you're going to do is you're going to wind up with a straight line, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if it'll show good on this grapefruit, but we'll see how it looks. You know, you're going to have a real thick line, then you're going to have a thin line. You want that line to be like this. You want one consistent look to the line as you're tattooing. And that's pretty much all you have to do to practice. I mean, get yourself a bag of grapefruits and do quite a few of those before you're even going to attempt to do someone's skin. Yeah. What I did now is I switched this over and I put a shading needle in there. This is a 7 shader. It's a round shader. And that's basically what you're going to be using to practice with and start your first tattoos are round shaders and outliners. You don't want to start, you'll see in some of the catalogs they have flat shaders and magnum shaders and they put ink faster. You're not even going to want to mess with those. That's a little more advanced. You're going to start with a simple round shader. This is a 7 round. And what I did on the grapefruit, like I was saying, you can just draw simple little shapes on here. It'll kind of show you how to shade and stuff. Just always remember you're going to have a light source on any tattoo you do. Always think about the lights coming from one direction. So if it's coming from this side, you're going to want to shadow everything so your lights are on one side, your darks are on the other side. And you can practice with this just like you're doing skin. Just kind of, you're going to see a little bit more ink coming out. You can see a little puddle of ink there. Then when you actually do skin, you probably won't get that much ink because this surface we're hitting here is pretty hard, so it's projecting out some ink. Skin's a little softer, obviously, so you won't get that. But you can basically just go around your shape and just kind of, you can shade different stuff. Just to get an idea, I'm just shading from one side and kind of just pulling out the machine so it gets a little bit of shading to it. You know, so start like each one of those, you can go around like that. And you can just wipe it off. And the center of this little design here, we'll fill it in. So just kind of follow it around and color. And when you color, you're going to color in small circles. You can see on the machine, I'm just barely making circles here. You're going to keep the machine moving, and each circle will overlap the last row that you did. And you're just going to keep doing that, and that's how you'll get a nice solid filled in area. And you'll see when we do the actual tattoo on somebody how this actually works. You can skip ahead on the tape and watch that, even though you're not going to start on skin, because you'll actually see what all this is doing and how everything is shadowed and shaded and how important that is when you're going to do the tattoo. But for now, you're going to just keep practicing on this kind of stuff. Practice your lines and outlines. So get yourself a few of these bags of grapefruits, because you're going to want to go through quite a few of those before you start on somebody. And again, always wear the gloves when you're working, you know. You're going to be working with skin, and there's going to be blood involved, so you're going to want to keep everything sterile, sanitized, and keep your hands protected. So always work with gloves, just as a practice. Just get into that habit of always wearing some good rubber gloves.